Welcome to the Astrocast.
Welcome back to the Astrocast. It's me, I'm your host, Rue. It's episode number 5. It's Tuesday, February 6, 2024. New moon is right around the corner. We're knocking on the door of new moon. I'm very excited about it. We've been quite lucky here in Charlotte. We've had a lot of really clear nights lately. Although I had one night, I believe it was Friday, I pulled all my gear out. I got set up. I was super excited. And then dang if these low-flying clouds didn't come through and just ruin my evening. I was working on going for the Dolphin Head Nebula, which is a super cool target that I have yet to image, and it's kind of low in my sky. It's in Canis Major, near Sirius, and I was not able to capture much of it, unfortunately, being that it's a very faint target. I would think at a minimum you'd want 3 or 4 hours of exposure on it, and I think I got like 10 3-minute exposures before those clouds rolled in and ruined it all. So that's unfortunate, but we have had several clear nights since then. I hurt my back yesterday, so I wasn't able to break the gear out. I was running some network cable underneath my house, and I haven't done that in, 15, 20 years. So it's been quite a while since I've been in a crawl space crawling around. It's good to know that I can still do it, but my back is reminding me that I'm 39 and not 22 anymore. But the good news is I was able to successfully run that Cat 6 line from my Google Fiber modem in the house out to my garage where I do all my work and where my main rig is. And now I'm getting like 800, 900 megabits down and up since it's a fiber connection, which is incredible. I actually have a server rack out here that I'm going to be hooking up over the weekend. And then I plan on spreading Ubiquiti access points all around the house. So one of the things that, a lot of people who use the ASI Air are very aware of is its, poor Wi-Fi connection. I've been quite lucky with mine. I actually haven't had any trouble with the Wi-Fi connection on my ASI Air. But that being said, I could have a better connection out front for sure. I live in a brick house, and when I close the garage door, which I always do when I'm imaging, you don't get great signal out front. So my plan is to run a Ubiquiti AP outside underneath the awning of my house, right in front of the garage, so that way I'll have a nice solid Wi-Fi connection outside to use whenever I am imaging. I love the advent of the ASI Air and similar devices, the Pegasus and Stellar View, I believe it's called, that allow us to remotely image from the house or, when we're out in the field. It's really cool to be able to just connect wirelessly and then go indoors to warm up whenever you need. Me personally, I do like to be outside under the stars when I'm imaging most of the time. But when you get that real cold night, and you guys know what I'm talking about, astronomers are a hardy breed. We can handle the cold, generally no problem. But when it gets to be like bone chilling cold, it's not a bad idea to go inside every 20, 30 minutes and, just warm up so you're not literally freezing to death. And, the ASI Air and the similar tools that we have now truly do allow us to do that, which is awesome. But one thing that has always driven me nuts about using these kind of tools is, just having to view it on the tiny little cell phone screen. I'm not a big fan of that. I do have a Samsung tablet as well that I can use to connect to the ASI Air, and that gives me a bigger screen. But ultimately, what I'd really like to do is be able to view that ASI Air app on my computer. So I can, sit down at my computer in my garage and view my session as the images come in. And I'm able to do that now, using screen mirror technology, basically. So I can open up my phone's screen, a mirror of it, in my Windows computer and view everything. Now, that being said, whenever I was running Nina and these images, were coming down and downloading directly onto my computer, well, it wasn't directly onto my computer inside. I'm running a laptop outside, which I am remoted into from my computer inside, and then I'm able to, hit the network folder that all of the files are being saved to. What I would like to do is auto stack those images as I go. And I actually found an application, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but it would basically allow you to select a folder and it would scan it however often you asked it to scan it and stack those pictures on top of each other as you go. So that was really cool, kind of like early live astronomy, or I'm sorry, electronic assisted astrophotography, which is something really, really neat because you can see all the detail coming out as those images come in. And that's really nice. So I think this technology is going to continue to evolve. I really wish the ASI Air team had more help because I know they get so many suggestions, hey, can you do this? Hey, can you do that? And it's a small team of developers from what I've been able to gather, and they do as much as they can, but man, oh man, there are a lot of variables when it comes to astronomy as far as, the different manufacturers and brands and cameras and focusers and telescopes, et cetera, et cetera. It must be a maddening database of various tools that they have to take care of. So keep that in mind if you ever go and suggest something to the ASI Air developers that might seem obvious to you. Just remember that they're buried in requests and they're doing everything they can to make it better. And there are other options out there. If you don't like the ASI Air, check out Nina. Nina is very powerful software. It's actually a lot more powerful than ASI Air in most regards, but the ASI Air is extremely convenient. And if you don't know what it is, I'll just briefly tell you since I'm sitting here yammering on about the ASI Air. It's basically a very small computer. It is, if you've ever heard of the Raspberry Pi computer, it is actually based off of that hardware. And it essentially combines all of the various software tools that you would run on, say, a Windows computer into one application. So you connect this device, the ASI Air, to your telescope. So you're going to plug everything from your telescope into the ASI Air. So your mount, your camera, your guide camera, your autofocuser if you have one, your filter wheel if you have one, it all plugs right into the ASI Air, and then that connects wirelessly to either your home network or directly to your smartphone or tablet, and then you're able to control everything from one application. And the huge advantage there is that one application thing. So whenever I started doing astrophotography, I started with Nina, and it's awesome software, highly customizable, and you can really get it to do anything you want. But the downside is there's a lot of different software that you need to download. There's drivers, there's different apps. If you want to use planetarium software, you got Stellarium. I know Nina has built-in planetarium software too, but I liked using Stellarium instead. You got to download just a lot of different tools that all have to be running together, and that can be really frustrating to a beginner. I know it took me quite a while, and I'm very tech savvy, to get everything running in sync with one another and make sure it was all, powered up correctly, etc. And the ASI Air really just kind of eliminates all that. It simplifies it and eliminates it. Now, the downside is you don't have as much fine control over things that you would in a program like Nina. So with astronomy and astrophotography, there's always pros and cons. So, if you're using one tool that's better in this way, then it's going to be worse in that way. And just like anything in life, there's going to be, pros and cons to everything. And it just really comes down to, what works for you. And I think the beauty of the age of astronomy that we're living in today is that there are so many options out there for people like us to choose from. So, if you don't like the ASI Air, try something else. If something else is too confusing and you can't figure it out, try the ASI Air. There's lots of different software out there to pick and choose from, and you definitely won't get bored exploring it all. Now, let's go ahead and shift topics to what I'd like to discuss this week with everyone. And this is a topic that is near and dear to myself because it's something that I kind of had to figure out on my own. And I wish I would have had a guide that could have told me some of these things before doing what I did. Now, knowing what I know, I'd like to share that information with as many people as possible, so hopefully they can avoid any embarrassing situations that they may run into. What I'm talking talking about is joining a local astronomy club and knowing how to act when you get there. So for most astronomy clubs, when you join, there is going to be a training session. So you're going to show up on, a date that is given by the director of the observatory or whoever is in charge of this process, and they're going to basically walk you through the rules and regulations of the club. If there's a lot of public telescopes that can be used, oftentimes they will show you how these telescopes work and kind of give you the basics so you can, get a good understanding of all the tools that are available at the club, what is and is not allowed, and just give you a sense of how the club operates, generally speaking. Now, when I went to my first meeting at the Astronomy Club, I was kind of shocked by a little bit of the behavior that I saw from some of those in attendance. And luckily for me, I was able to develop a bit of a relationship with the director of the observatory afterwards, and I asked him his thoughts and feelings on some of those behaviors and what he typically witnesses, these types of questions. And so I basically kind of want to just take a little bit of time to go through the do's and do not do's of joining your local astronomy club. So first things first, how do you find your astronomy club? How do you know if there's even one nearby? I wasn't really sure, and I live in a relatively large city on the East Coast. I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, as many of you who've listened to the show before probably know, and I wasn't really aware if we had one. So Google obviously is a good resource here. You can go search, your hometown astronomy club and view the results. But NASA actually has an excellent website called the Night Sky Network. That is an excellent resource for finding out what clubs are in your area. And oftentimes they link directly to that club's website, their calendar, and a wealth of other resources that can be utilized directly through the Night Sky Network. For example, with the Charlotte Amateur Astronomer Club, they've got a nice about section. It tells you a little bit about the history. It gives you contacts to, the important people that are at the club, and also upcoming events, which is really nice. So, there are fees involved with most astronomy clubs. If you're going to join your local club, generally speaking, there is a small payment that is made. When that payment is made, now it's collected, obviously varies from club to club. But for example, my club, the dues are $60 per year currently, and we pay those in October. And I got to tell you guys, for $60 a year, it's an absolute steal for all of the various tools, the dark skies, and just everything that you get for your money. I'm telling you, with all the subscriptions that we pay for in this day and age that are, $10, $20 per month, $60 a year for access to some of the best telescopes that you've ever seen is just unreal. So definitely look into your local astronomy club, and a lot of times they'll let you come out as a guest to kind of see things during a training session and see if it's for you or not. I would highly encourage everyone to join their local astronomy club though. So after you locate your astronomy club, maybe you go ahead and join. Like me, for example, I went ahead and paid those dues, and then I got an email which contained a newsletter of when they were going to be holding their next training session. So when we get back from the break, we're going to talk about what you should do when you go to this training session, the types of questions you should and should not ask, and just general overall behavior. So thank you for listening to the Astrocast. I'm your host, Rue. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Astrocast. I'm your host, Rue. Today we are talking about joining your local astronomy club and the etiquette that we should present when we go for our first training session at that club. So a couple of things to keep in mind when you first arrive to the astronomy club. You want to remember that there are likely going to be people there that have never touched a telescope in their entire lives. And the reason that I'm bringing this up is I think that we all have a tendency to want to just, tell people about what we've done and, what we like to do with our hobby. And you just need to keep in mind that the instructor, he or her, has to explain everything from the bottom up to people who have maybe never touched a scope in their lives. So what you don't want to do is be interrupting them while they're trying to, teach a course essentially to all the newcomers about how everything at the club works. For example, there was a person whenever I first went to my introductory training course that was also into astrophotography, and he kept chiming in, every chance that he got to say, what's the focal length on that, and what kind of cameras can you hook up to it, and I'm really into astrophotography, so da 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 da. And honestly, the guy just kind of came off looking like a know-it-all, and no one was impressed. Frankly, I just kind of thought it was a drag because he was interrupting the teacher and saying, look at me, look at me, look at me. Now, that being said, there is a time and place to have those discussions. And believe me, if you join an astronomy club, you are going to be having those discussions all the time. And it's wonderful to be around like-minded individuals who you can discuss this hobby with in deep detail. That is like my favorite thing about joining an astronomy club, is that I'm finally around like-minded individuals. When I started astronomy, I thought it was a very, very solo art. And boy, was I wrong. Once I joined my local club, I've met so many new friends. I run into the same people when I go down on the weekends, whenever it's new moon. And man, we get to talk shop for hours and hours and hours under the stars, which is just incredible. But when you're first getting there for the first time and the instructor is trying to teach maybe a 8-year-old kid who's never even looked through an eyepiece, what's what, that's not the time to talk about how great you are at, imaging the Orion Nebula, because people are going to be confused. You're not really adding anything to the conversation, and I can promise you the instructor is not impressed. So that's going to be our very first tip. Etiquette when you arrive to your training class for your astronomy club: keep your mouth shut. Let the teacher talk. Listen, you might even learn something. For example, he was talking about a very old refractor telescope during my training session, and went over the history of it and explained, why it's a historical instrument, etc. And it was really incredible. And that's something that, had I been looking at my phone and showing pictures of people, I may have missed. So let's just be quiet and let the instructor do their thing. And when we're done with all of that and gathered in the parking lot and talking, then we can discuss all those types of things. All right, so we know the etiquette basics, what to do and what not to do as far as, being quiet while you're taking this training course, etc. Now, another thing that's really important is to take notes on the important things that the instructor mentions. Usually there is going to be a very good security system at any club because they want to make sure that all of their investments are protected. There could be things like security codes that need to be memorized. Perhaps there is a Wi-Fi password that needs to be memorized, and all these types of things. If you're not paying attention when the instructor's talking, you're going to have to ask somebody else later, hey, what was the Wi-Fi password? Or hey, how do I get into this lockbox? And these types of things. And that can be really embarrassing because, you have the instructor who just told you all of these things the first night you were here, and now you're having to walk around the club and ask random members what the Wi-Fi password is. So take notes while you're there. If you want to bring a pad and pen or your phone, it's okay to break that out if you're just taking notes as the instructor's talking, and just pay attention to the important things. If there's a specific code that you need to get into the warm room, you want to make sure that you write that down. If there is a Wi-Fi password for when you're on the premises, make sure that you jot that down, so that way you don't have to ask other people, over and over again about those types of things. Another thing that you want to keep in mind when you join your local astronomy club is don't expect for all doors to be open to you on day one just because you paid, that $60 fee to join the club. You don't want to go in and say, hey, can I use the $200,000 telescope, this weekend when I just joined? You're probably going to get a no on that. So the best way to gain the trust of the people that work at the observatory is to show up and be there. Actual FaceTime is the best way to gain trust. Show respect for the equipment, show respect for the grounds, and when you show up, make sure that you are courteous to other members. Make sure, above all, that any equipment that you use gets returned returned to the exact same way that you found it. When we first came and he was showing us that refractor telescope, he pulled out several things that weren't put back the way that they should have been. And in fact, there was a very expensive Teleview eyepiece that had been broken and something else had gone missing, which is never good. You don't want to steal from a club. You should never steal from anywhere, but my goodness, stealing from your local astronomy club is probably one of the scummiest things you could ever do. So definitely don't take something unless you've asked for it. Even if you're just borrowing it, you want to always make sure that you ask someone who works for the observatory if it's okay to use. And again, don't think that they're going to hand you their, top of the line astronomy camera just because you're a member of the club. You need to be a member of the club for a little bit of time, get to know some of the people, get to know, the folks who work the grounds, who take care of the telescopes and these types of things. And, the more people who know you, the more comfortable they're going to be with letting you use their equipment. So if you, continue to show up, once a month, let's say, and you get to know people by name and they get to know your face, then, these doors are going to open to you and you will be able to use the more advanced equipment. Once you show that you're able to, let's say, use the Dobsonian and put it back neatly after you're done, then maybe they'll let you, move on to the more expensive refractor or pull out one of the astronomy cameras, etc. But don't be discouraged if on day one you're not able to use every single tool in the club, because those doors will unlock to you if you're just patient and respectful and, just continue to show up. That's the main thing that you need to do. So that being said, after the instructor has finished teaching his course, what I would recommend doing is maybe hanging out for a little while afterwards and trying to get to know the instructor, figure out what his title is and what his responsibilities include with the club, and then ask any kind of questions that you may have that came up during his instruction. So this is the time to start asking all the detailed questions if you have specific ones about, any of the telescopes that they showed you or the rules for the club and those types of things. After he is done with his course, that's when you want to go ahead and ask those questions. So for me personally, I hung out a little while afterwards and I found out the person who was giving that instruction was indeed the director of the observatory. So definitely an excellent person to get to know and be on a first name basis with. So he was able to show me his telescope afterwards. He showed me, his personal observatory, and it was really cool. I got to know his partner, who's an awesome guy by the name of Jeff, and, we talked for a long time. He told me that they started their own astrophotography company, which is very, very impressive in a lot of the hardware and software that they're building. And just overall, it was really cool getting to know somebody else outside of myself that was just as into astronomy as myself. And then, he was able to introduce me to other people at the club and tell me about other members and what their roles were and those types of things. So, when he got done teaching that class, most of the people just hopped in their car and drove off. And I guarantee you, well, I'm not going to say guarantee, but I would be willing to bet 50% of those people probably never returned to the club. I can't remember the exact number he gave because I did ask him. I said, how many of these people do you think will actually come back? And he said, a few looked like they probably would. But I'm sure, quite a few never will. And they just joined to, go have a look. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's not for everybody. And that's why they hold these types of introductory classes so people can get a feel for it. So, but like I say, afterwards, feel free to ask all the questions that were on your mind. If you want to ask about specific equipment, that's the time to do it. And don't maybe, ask, hey, can I borrow this? Hey, can I use that? Day number one is not the time to do that. Get a little bit more face time. Maybe show up to a star party, a little hint for what we're going to talk about next, and then get your name around the club, and people will start to recognize you, and then all those doors are going to open up. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we are going to talk about going to your first star party at an astronomy club, what to expect, what to do, what not to do. You are listening to the Astrocast. I'm your host, Rue, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Astrocast. I'm your host, Rue. Today we are discussing astronomy clubs, the do's and do not do's of joining one, and now we're going to move on to going to your first star party. So what is a star party? Well, It's generally a party where all of the club members are invited to get together and bring all their telescopes. Whatever you have, you can bring it out and look through all the various telescopes. And generally, it's going to go right before sundown all the way to sunrise. Although you'll find usually most people will not make it to sunrise. Some clubs will even have a breakfast the morning after a star party, which is always a lot of fun. And my club in particular will often have Boy Scout campouts. So they invite the Boy Scouts out to a star party, and they get to all look through the telescopes and learn about the night sky, which is really cool. But generally speaking, the star party is, it's during new moon is when you'll usually see them, when the sky is best, and everybody gets to come out, get together, talk all night, look through a lot of different telescopes, and it's really just a great time to go to your local observatory. So before we get too deep into what all happens during a star party, I think the first and most important thing we could go through is the etiquette of going to a star party, because there's a lot of stuff that might not be readily apparent if you've never been to one that you should and should not be doing when you go to your first one. So the first thing I would suggest when going to your first star party is going to be timing related. I would highly recommend, if you are going to go, to show up before sundown. So there's a lot of different reasons for this, but the main one is if it's your first time going to a star party at the observatory, you might not be super familiar with the grounds yet, and you might also not be super familiar with the various rules in terms of lighting. And lighting is something that is extremely important and that we will talk about shortly here. But showing up ahead of time before sunset is crucial. I still do that to this day. Anytime that I go to the observatory, I try to get there at least an hour before sundown. And the reason for this is it gives me daylight to work in, to bring out my gear, to get my telescope set up. I'm usually there before a lot of the others show up, because a lot of people don't even bother showing up until it's dark out because they're, going to a star party, especially if they're not bringing a telescope. Then, yeah, okay, maybe you can show up after dark. But if it's your first time going, show up while it's still light out. Give yourself that leeway, and it's just going to make things so much easier for you. You're going to be able to find, the public pad where all of the various telescopes are set up. You're going to be able to drive with your headlights on, or not need headlights, I should say, because it's still light out, which is a whole other topic that can, vary from club to club. But showing up ahead of time, very important. Make sure you do it. The few times that I've shown up after it's already dark out, it's taken me a lot longer to get set up. And honestly, I kind of feel like a pain in the ass to all the people around me, because they're looking at me like, hey guy, why are you showing up so late setting up your telescope? We've already, got all lights off, etc. And no matter, how good you are about keeping the light to a minimum, you're probably going to annoy those around you a little bit if you're setting up after it's already sundown. So keep that in mind. Show up early. That's going to be our first etiquette rule. All right, so you've arrived on site to your local club. The sun's still out. The first thing you want to do is walk around and introduce yourself to some people. So you're likely going to see a lot of faces that you've never seen before, and you don't know who any of these people are. You don't know if they work at the observatory or if they're just members or maybe a mix of both. So why don't you go around and just say hi to some people first? If you've brought your own telescope and you're planning on setting up on the pad, locate that. Walk up, ask people, hey, is this the area where, members can set up their telescopes? Introduce yourself to people that are already set up or are setting up on the pad, and just, get to know them a little bit. So what I would not recommend is pulling up to the site and getting out and carrying your tripod, your bag, and all your gear and hauling that down while looking around like a lost person trying to find the pad. Get the lay of the ground first. So hop out of your car and don't grab any of your gear. Just lock the car, walk down until you find the public pad, say hello to some people, and then maybe say, hey, is this corner taken? Would it be okay if I set my telescope up here? And that way, that gives you time to go back to the car and start grabbing your gear. One thing in particular that I learned by doing this method at my club is that we actually have a cart that is available to members. So you can load all of your gear up in a cart and then just simply wheel it down to the pad. Now, I don't know if that's the case at all observatories, but that's just something that I learned by simply walking down and saying hello and introducing myself and saying, hey, can I set up here? They said, yeah, you can absolutely set up here. In fact, there's a cart over there that you can use to grab all your gear, which is awesome because otherwise it would have taken me probably 4 or 5 trips from that pad to my truck to get all of my gear because, you don't want to fumble when you're carrying very expensive astrophotography gear or telescopes down to the pad. So be careful, look where you're walking. There's going to be cords that are out. There's going to be concrete pads. There's tripping hazards. So keep your eyes open, have a good look where you're walking, and just pay attention. So that's something that I want to touch on, just paying attention. It's really important to be aware of your surroundings when you're at your club. There's lots of people that are using lots of very expensive gear, and the last thing that you want to do is accidentally trip over somebody's extension cord and send their multi-$1,000 rig tumbling to the ground. I can promise you will not make any friends doing this. So be very careful, be very aware of your surroundings. And next we're going to talk about, what you can do to prepare yourself before heading out to avoid things like this and just make yourself, a better member of the club and be respectful of other people that are around you. And a lot of that has to do with light, which is what we're going to talk about now. So what do I mean about light when I say light is important, as far as being aware of what is around you? Well, what I mean is eliminating all sources of light that you might be producing from yourself, your smartwatch, your phone, and in particular, your rig. So the way that you can do this is to set your telescope rig up at home at night, turn it on, and then see anywhere and everywhere that light is coming off of that rig. So if you can cover up this type of stuff before you arrive at the club, then you're going to save yourself a headache. Unfortunately for me, I learned the hard way. I went down to Star Party night, thought I was, behaving very perfect. And then somebody came up to me and said, hey man, you need to cover up all those red lights, because I had a red light coming off my ASI Air, had one coming off of my mount. And luckily they had some black tape on site and I was able to get everything covered up. But that's something that I could have done ahead of time had I thought about it. So if I would have just set my rig up at home and then gone around with gaffer's tape and covered up every little light that is coming off of it, that's one less thing that I would have had to have worried about after I got set up at the club. Now, other light sources that you need to be very cognizant of are your phone, laptop, or tablet, whichever device it is that you're using. If you require one to control your rig, then you are going to want to make sure that you can eliminate as much light as possible that is coming off of it. A great way to do that is to get a big plastic tote and then put whatever it is that you're using, be it a laptop, a tablet, or your phone, inside that tote, and then drape a towel over it. You can get one of these totes for very little money at a Walmart or a Target. In fact, my club, which is something that I learned by simply introducing myself and asking people, they have these totes on site for members to use. So when I arrive, I can actually go and grab one and set it up on the table near where my telescope is going to be, put my tablet inside of it, and then drape a towel over it. Some other things that you can do that can really help is put a red filter on if it's available. So my tablet, for example, there is a red light filter on my Samsung tablet that I can apply, and that's just easier on the eyes for everyone around. So when I do have to briefly open it up to see, is my guiding okay? Is all my exposures, working properly, etc. That red light filter helps out tremendously. You can also do that on your smartphone. So all smartphones, whether it be an iPhone or an Android, have the ability to put a red light filter on them. You can go pretty far with this. You could even get a red light physical filter that goes over the front of your screen. I don't personally do this, but I do know people that do at the club. But that's another thing you can do to eliminate light. This is really important because when it's new moon, and if you've got perfect conditions, the smallest bit of light can just be blindingly bright at night. And if you've ever been to a true dark sky site, you'll know this. And a lot of astronomy clubs are set up in areas that are dark. So ours is a Bortle 4, which isn't like incredibly dark. by dark sky standards, but it's a lot darker than my house and Matthew's is, which is a Bortle 6 or 7. So if I have a little red light coming off of my rig, everybody in the whole observatory that has a line of sight towards it is going to be able to see that light. So instead of having the embarrassing moment of the observatory, worker coming up and tapping you on the shoulder and saying, hey man, you need to cover up all those lights, be aware of it ahead of time. Tape up everything that you possibly can ahead of time so you don't have to worry about that. Figure out how a red filter works on your device, whatever it is that you're using, be it a laptop, tablet, or smartphone. Make sure you know how to quickly apply that filter so you can avoid being the guy who has bright lights. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we're going to talk about some other stuff regarding light and one of the most important things, which is how to see when you're getting around. You are listening to the Astrocast. I'm your host, Rue. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Astrocast. I'm your host, Rue. Today we're talking about star parties and the etiquette that we should show when we arrive at our first one, what to do, what not to do, etc. So far, we've covered making sure that we show up before sundown, which is just an awesome idea, and then making sure that you cover up all the lights that you may have on your rig, and then, how to deal with light coming from your devices like your tablet, smartphone, laptop, etc. So what about once it's dark out and you need to be able to see for whatever reason, say you need to walk to the warm room, or maybe you need to make an adjustment to something on your telescope and you have to see? Well, this is understandable. So we all have to, create light at some point during the night if we need to see something. And the key here is to make sure that you create red light. Red light is much easier on the eyes. It does not affect our vision, our night vision that is, in the same way that white light does. So what you want to purchase before heading out to your local club is going to be a red headlamp. Now, this is a very inexpensive purchase, but man, oh man, it is absolutely crucial. If there is one thing I could suggest buying before you head out to your first star party, it's going to be a red headlamp. You can get these anywhere from $15 to $30 on Amazon. They're very inexpensive. Now, one thing to keep in mind about these is I have yet to find a red headlamp that only does red, and I hate that about them because you can accidentally turn on an extremely bright white light if you don't press the right button. And sometimes when it's late at night and you're tired and you're maybe not thinking super clearly, you might accidentally press the white light, and you can tick off a lot of people at the same time if you accidentally turn on a blinding white light while everybody is out observing and their night vision is perfectly adapted. It can take half an hour for your eyes to really adapt to seeing at night, and just a split second of bright white light can take all that away. So it is really important that you learn ahead of time. You need to make it muscle memory for turning on your red lamp. If you can, even block out the white lights. I have a friend at my club who actually took apart his headlamp and physically disconnected the white bulbs on it, the LEDs. That's actually a great idea. I haven't done that with mine yet. I've seen some people put black tape over the white LED part and then leave the red ones exposed. That's also something cool you can do. Me personally, I just memorized, which button is the red button. And anytime I go to turn on my lamp, I try to stop and think for a moment and say, okay, this is the correct one on the right side. I'm pressing the right button. The red lamp's going to come on. If you're not certain, walk into the warm room, go into the bathroom, shut the door behind you, and then turn it on. You really don't want to be the guy who blinds everybody with white light while a star party's going on. It's not going to, set a good precedent for you. So make sure that you pay attention to that. But, all that being said, it is really important to have that red headlamp because it's going to let you navigate the grounds of the observatory during the star party. At some point, you're likely going to need to leave that public pad and walk up to the bathroom or the warm room to warm up for a few minutes. And when you do that, you want to make sure that you can see where you're going, because like we talked about earlier, the last thing you want to do is accidentally trip over somebody's extension cord and destroy their $5,000 rig because you couldn't see where you're going. So that red headlamp is going to help alleviate that problem. And, with that being said, you don't want to have your red lamp on the whole time that you're out there. That can get annoying, but it's okay to turn on a red headlamp for, brief periods of time. If you need to make an adjustment, if you need to see where you're going and these types of things, everybody on site is going to understand and, be appreciative that you're using a red headlamp instead of a flashlight. You will get kicked out of a star party so fast if you show up with a bright white flashlight and try to use that to navigate around. It's incredibly rude. Don't be the guy who does that. If you can't find a red headlamp before your first star party, don't bring a lamp at all, because it's better to, be out there in the dark than trying to use a white light. You do not want to be the guy who does that. So while we're talking about bright lights, let me also briefly touch on headlamps on your car. So you're really going to have to feel this out by club. Some clubs might have a wall built up or a fence on the side where it can block out light. But generally speaking, if you can kill your headlights before pulling up, if it's nighttime when you're arriving, you're going to want to try to do that. I know that this can be difficult to do, but what you want to avoid at all costs is having your bright headlamps turn on to the, viewing section of the Astronomy Club when you're pulling up. So, if you got to keep the headlights on up until you get to the parking lot, that's understandable. But if you think that they are going to cross the path of where people are viewing, please turn them off before arriving. Another thing I want to mention as far as bright lights are concerned is the practice of taking flats. So for those who are doing astrophotography, you are probably well aware of calibration frames that we refer to as flats. And basically, this is taking, something like a tablet or, I use a tracing pad with a, white light behind it, and you basically place that on top of your telescope, and your telescope takes pictures of that white light, and it's used to calibrate out things like dust and what have you that might get stuck on your telescope. So if you're just arriving to the star party and you're wanting to do astrophotography that night, and you say, well, I need to take my flats, the best way to do this is to arrive before sundown. So, once it's twilight out, it's dark enough to take flats, but not so dark that you're going to tick people off by, breaking out your bright white flat panel and taking those shots. That's the best time to do it, in my experience. So your other option is going to be, if you plan on staying all night, you can take them, first thing in the morning, whenever the sun starts to come up and everybody's done imaging. That would also be a good time to take flats. What you don't want to do is, when it's midnight and everybody is imaging and looking up at the stars, don't pull out your flat panel and turn it on and blind everybody with that white light so you can, capture your flats. That's just incredibly rude, and it's something that you should never do. So definitely don't be that guy. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we're going to talk about a few more things regarding star party etiquette. You are listening to the Astrocast, and I'm your host, Rue. Thanks. Welcome back to the Astrocast. This is Rue. Thank you for tuning in this week to talk about star parties with us. Just a few more things that I want to touch on for star party etiquette. And really, this is just, tips for you when you're at the star party. So, if you're bringing your telescope to do something like astronomy or astrophotography, something I'm going to recommend to you is after you get it all set up and, you're done looking at what you want to look at, or perhaps you started your imaging session and it's taking photos, this would be an excellent time to walk around and talk to other people. So one of the greatest things about attending a star party is the fact that you get to look through other telescopes that you might otherwise never get to see. So we have like a ginormous 24-inch reflector telescope that you need a ladder to climb to at our club to look through the eyepiece of. And, anytime that that's out at a star party, I'm always going to go over and have a look. I'll never forget one of the club members had it out and they were looking at the Eastern and Western Veil Nebula, and I had never seen it through an eyepiece. And man, oh man, man, it was incredible seeing this incredible nebula through this giant telescope. I didn't even realize that you could see it that well through any telescope. I thought astrophotography was the only way. But no. With the right telescope, you can see quite a lot of detail in a lot of these nebulas. So that's kind of the whole point of a star party, is to socialize, walk around, talk to like-minded individuals, and check out their setups. So, maybe you're thinking about getting a new piece of equipment and you're not sure, if you want to buy it yet, or you're leaning this way or that. Why not walk around and see if somebody else has that piece of equipment or something similar and ask their opinion on it? Maybe you're going to get out of your comfort zone and do some planetary viewing or imaging when you normally image nebula. That's a great time to do it at a star party. So the main thing that I would, recommend is get out of your comfort zone, leave your bubble a little bit, go around and talk to your fellow club members and introduce yourself, get to know them, figure out what their passions are. There is a guy at our club that has a gigantic Dobsonian scope, and he just loves looking at specific galaxies and just trying to see what he can resolve. And I find that, so awesome that that's what he likes to do, because it's not something that I could ever see myself doing, but man, oh man, is it fun to, have a peek through his eyepiece whenever he's resolved a really small galaxy that is, ridiculously far away. And these are the kind of experiences that you're never going to get if you're just, at home doing the same imaging that you generally do by yourself. That's the whole point of joining a club, is getting to know other people and getting to, view other examples of the night sky through various optical instruments that you do not own yourself. So definitely make sure that you go around and talk to people. I promise you they will be welcoming, they will be friendly, and it's just an awesome way to get to know new friends. I have met so many friends through my local astronomy club that I talk to on a regular basis now. You'll find that a lot of astronomy clubs have their own chat channel. For example, our club has a Slack channel with various visual, astrophotography, etc. sections that you can go in and talk to people with. And maybe you want to get a feel for who's going to be down at the club this weekend. You can go on there and talk with your friends and say who all is going to be there Saturday night, because you're thinking about going, and find out who's going to be there and plan ahead appropriately. So the more people you get to know, the better time you're going to have. And I can promise you that whatever investment you made to join your club is going to feel like just a total drop in the bucket compared to the massive experiences that you can get. I consider my local astronomy club to be just a very, very special place. That's the conversation that me and my friend, who, we often go down there together, we've had so many times, is, man, that is just a really special place. When you can go out there on a crystal clear night and see the Milky Way with your own eyes and talk for hours on end with other people about all things astronomy, it's really special, guys. It really is. And I want as many people to experience that as possible. So if you're listening to this show right now and you haven't been to your local astronomy, this is your guide. Go for it, man. This is the sign you've been waiting for. Join that club. Make new friends. This isn't just a solo hobby. I mean, I know it is a lot of the time, but it doesn't have to be that way. There are like-minded individuals out there that are ready and willing, that want to talk to you, that want to talk shop, that want to, show you their gear. They want to help you with yours. Perhaps you're, new to astronomy and you don't know how a particular piece of equipment works. Bring it down to your club. I guarantee you people will be lined up to show you how it works. It's really a unique experience that's unlike anything else in any hobby that I have ever done. So join your local astronomy club, go to that first star party, and have a great time. We're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we're going to wrap up the show. You're listening to the Astrocast. I'm your host, Rue. Thanks. Welcome back to the Astrocast. I'm your host, Rue. This week we've been talking about all things Astronomy Club and attending your first star party. And that kind of takes me to our recommendation of the week. It's something that I briefly touched on earlier in our discussion, but I wanted to give you the specific web address for it, and that is the Night Sky Network, which is an awesome website that is run by NASA that gathers all of the various astronomy clubs in North America together under one roof so you can find your local club. I am going to put the link for this site in the show notes, so feel free to grab it there if you don't hear me say it now, but that's going to be nightsky.jpl.nasa.gov. Not sure why it has such a convoluted name, but if you just go to Google and search for Night Sky Network, it'll be the first thing that comes up. And again, this is just an awesome resource for finding your local club. Usually they have a lot of integration with local clubs, so you can see, lots of stats about the club, how to join, the calendar, what events are taking place. My club, in fact, does a monthly meeting at a local church, and it'll usually tell you ahead of time, like who is going to be the keynote speaker for this month, what they're going to be talking about, and those types of things. And those are just awesome meetings to attend. It's different from a star party, but you can get a whole lot of knowledge from attending those lectures, and that's something that my club does monthly. So I'm sure other clubs do similar things, but Night Sky Network is an excellent resource to get you there. Finally, a couple other quick things I want to mention. We would love to hear from you guys. I would like to start a weekly questions and answers section on the podcast. So if you would like to reach out to us with any questions that you have, there's a couple of ways that you can reach out. You can feel free to email me at rooastrocast@gmail.com. Again, that is ROO astrocast@gmail.com. Or you can reach us on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it these days. Our handle is at AstrocastRue on Twitter. Again, that is at AstrocastRue. And just, include any question that you may have. If you have comments about the show, opinions, etc., please send them my way, because I really would love to hear back from our listeners and kind of get a feel for what you think about the show. If you have any suggestions, if there's topics that you would like me to cover in the future, that would be an excellent way to get in touch with me. And, I just want to start going back and forth with the community a bit. I know that we're getting quite a few more listeners every week, which is a really awesome thing. It's very humbling to start a show from nothing and have dozens of people every week tuning in, and hopefully over time that's going to turn into hundreds and then thousands, and the sky's the limit. My goal is to have everybody who likes listening to podcasts and who is into astronomy tune in to us every week. That would be ultimately what I would love to do, just because I love spreading the word of astronomy. It's my favorite hobby by far. It's, I don't even know if I can call it a hobby. It's a way of life at this point for me. I plan a lot of my weeks and nights around it. I plan trips around it, and my future is based on what I'm going to be able to do in this hobby. So it's more than a hobby, and I'm sure a lot of you feel the same way about it. So please feel free to reach out to me. Again, Gmail, rooastrocast@gmail.com, or hit us up on Twitter. That is AstrocastRue for my handle. So that is going to do it for this week's episode. Greatly appreciate everybody tuning in. New moon is just a couple days away, so I hope you have a nice cloudless sky for new moon. We'll be back next week with a new episode. Thanks so much for listening. Clear skies. What are you doing? Why are you still listening? Do you think I'm going to suggest another podcast again? Because I'm not. Okay, maybe one. Go listen to Ear Biscuits. It's Rhett and Link's show. If you don't know who they are, well, you will after you listen to Ear Biscuits. Once you're done with that, go watch their YouTube channel. See you next week.